just done an episode one-on-one with Annie. Her screen name is Annie Oakley, the female gunslinger back in the day, the young gunslinger. Annie Oakley, famous cowboy, cowgirl. I remember one time when I joined the Darlie Routier debate page, which Cathy's been running for years, along with her friend Jamie. Jamie comes on Rich's panel as Jamie, but her name is Diane Loman Patterson. She's a friend of Darlie's too. Lives down that area. For some reason, I don't know why these people don't want to put their name on the shit that they spew about Darlie being innocent. They don't really want to put their name on it. So I give Rich much respect for putting his name on it. His name. This is my name, and this is what I believe. I was going to say that one time I joined the debate page that Cathy runs, and at the time I had a picture of a young girl with a rifle as my profile picture. And Cathy told me, with the name Annie Oakley, that she had to put me out of the group because my profile picture was inappropriate. The picture I had was a young Annie Oakley. So that's who you're dealing with there. Somebody named Annie Oakley told me that my picture of Annie Oakley was inappropriate. So she had to boot me from that group. Cathy is also one of the ones who stuck up hard for Ryan Kester, who was in that group. 14 years old. He's a genius. He's the young guy the college genius who changed his mind about Darlie. But when he was in their group, 14 years old, oh, they just loved him. Look at him. He's really smart. Look, listen. They made him an administrator of that Facebook group at 14 years old. So I messaged Cathy. I said, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you guys, but he's only 14 years old. Yeah, but he's really smart. He's above in his years and blah 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 blah. I said he's 14 years old. You don't need to have him in this group selling this bullshit to the public about a convicted criminal. And so she booted me from the group for that. So when she booted me from the group for that, I got a hold of Ryan Kester's mother, found him, and told her what these Darlie supporters were doing. They were exploiting his intelligence and insulting it at the same time. So they took a look. I guess his parents took a look at the group and looked at what's going on and pulled him out of it. Pulled him out of it. Then shortly after, Ryan Kester did his own research and his opinion changed to Darlie is guilty. Anybody can look up Ryan Kester, Darlie Routier on Google, and you can find out about him. I spoke to him a few months ago. That's the Cathy that we're dealing with here. That's the hypocrite that we're dealing with here. You can't have that picture, but I can. And your picture's inappropriate because that's a young girl with a gun. But we can have this little teenage boy as an administrator. That's who we're dealing with. Now, Cathy speaks on Darlie, through this first part of the video. She talks about how well she knows Darlie. She's giving evaluations on the boys, but she hadn't even seen them since 95. October, she says. I asked her one time in the chat. She was in one chat room, and I was in another, and she spoke to me. Usually she just ignores me because they have to ignore me. They got to ignore me. They don't want to get caught up in some bullshit, so they just pretend like I'm scum of the earth and they ignore me. They're just so much better than me. You know what I mean? If I was Darlie's family or Darlie's friends, and we had one guy out here that kept saying she was guilty, 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 I wouldn't ignore that person. I'd do everything I could to show where he was wrong, and they can't do it. Cathy she's a bright woman. She speaks really slow. She's 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 bright, but she doesn't use it in her. She tries to gaslight. She's a gaslighter, and she'll if you go to debate with her, she'll tell you what you have to think. She'll tell you can't do this, you can't think like that, and blah 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 blah. Claims she knows them, but I don't think Darlie knows it, or that Cathy knows them as well. She said for someone that's such a close friend that could tell the public how Devin and Damon acted and how Darlie was, and they're just so sure of her character. Such a good friend. She didn't go to the hospital when Darlie was in there. She didn't go to the funerals. She didn't go to the wake. She didn't go to the silly string party. She didn't go to any of the trial. None of it. But this is Darlie's good friend. So I asked her, I said, well, how come you didn't, what was the funeral like? And she said, well, I didn't go to the funeral. There's an alarm going off next door. She said, well, I didn't go to the funeral. And I said, well, how come you couldn't make it? She's supposed to be your friend. She might have needed your help and all that. She said, well, the job I had wouldn't let me off work for the funeral. And I didn't know what kind of job she had at the time. I was like, damn, that must be a shitty job. Not let you off, two kids dead, national news. This is your friend. They wouldn't let you off. But she said she worked at Sam's as a product demonstrator. When you go into the stores and sometimes they want to feed you or they want to show you something, they got their little booth set up. She said that they wouldn't let her off work to go to the funeral. Can you imagine that, going to your boss and saying, hey, look, a friend of mine, you know, somebody came in their house and stabbed her and killed two of her kids, and I need to be at the funeral for that. Can you imagine some boss saying, no, we need you here? We need you here. Well, if that was my friend and any job that I worked at, they said, we need you here, I would have quit. And it wasn't like it was a big executive job. She worked at Sam's demonstrating products. I mean, it's a job, but it's not a professional job. It's not a skilled job. It's not anything that you couldn't replace. Devin and Damon couldn't be replaced. So apparently she chose Sam's over Devin and Damon and Darlie and their friendship. That's what she did. Cathy Ramsey will lie right to you. I don't follow her anymore. I'm not arguing with her anymore, but you can go over and look at the Darlie Routier debate page if you can see it. Get in there and just take a look, and you can see she's a fibber. I think she just inserted herself into the case because she may have knew Darlie. She may have babysitted. She may have. But there weren't long friendships, And I haven't listened to this whole thing yet, but I'm gonna go through a little bit of it. She says she met them when she lived in an apartment complex, and Darlie and Denny, the one who was molesting Darlie, lived in that apartment complex too. They keep saying that Darlie didn't have any psychological problems whatsoever. Well, we don't know what she was holding because she was being molested from the age 8 on by this man, Denny, and nobody believed her. And she had to live with that. Up to the point of writing about it shortly before the murders. I don't know why Denny did what he did to me. Here's your mental illness. See, when people think of mental illness, they think it's because somebody's crazy. No, mental illness can be because they've been harmed. PTSD.
Sure. And murder mysteries, things like that. But he wasn't much into the Agatha Christie. He was John Grisham, or he wanted the heady detective, the Sam Spade, or the that type of programming. And I was more into John Douglas. You know,
Okay.
so we were, so we both, shared some literature and everything, and we knew, simply from knowing how the court systems work and things like that the chances of it being Darlie were just like slim to none.
Yeah.
Simply because she didn't exhibit any of the psychological. Uh,
The key word here is exhibit. She didn't exhibit any of the psychological compounds that come with people who kill. Exhibit is the key word. It means to show, to present. Well, she learned a long time ago that when she was a kid that complaining about Denny Stahl molesting her is a moot point in her family because they did everything they could to protect him. So she had to hold that in. The psychological effects of and she had to look at him. Not only did she have to look at him, he went on and had two more kids with her.
profiling that you would see in a psychopath or uh, she wasn't as they said, a material girl. No, she liked nice things, but she was, just as happy before in their little apartment when they didn't have anything. She loved her kids and her husband the same. Sure, the stuff was nice, but if I promise you, if one of those kids, just like Drake, came down with cancer, they would have sold everything and lived in a shed
Yeah.
to afford the best of care for him.
Well, the rest of her family didn't sell everything and live in sheds. Danelle stepped up to take care of him. They didn't have to sell off anything to get him treatment. Danelle stepped up to take care of Drake, and I always gave her props for that.
Yeah, I
So,
know.
she liked nice things. Who doesn't? But that was
Well, I
not the
mean,
focus of her world. It wasn't going to kill her to lose everything. You know what I mean? It
right.
wouldn't have been the end of her world if she'd lost everything or
We know that because she did lose everything, and it hasn't driven her crazy.
declared bankruptcy or it's some people like in the depression had to jump out of windows,
Yeah.
on the stock market, but she was not so wrapped up in that.
When she was a young girl, up to the time when she got married to Darren, I believe she was 18 when her and Darren got married. So they got married very young. Did you ever notice any type of irrational behavior out of Darlie in any way?
Well, Kathy wasn't around for him to be asking these questions. She just wasn't. Kathy wasn't the type of good old friend that you know everything about your buddy. She was associated with Darlie.
Because, and I ask this because, and I know the answer to these questions I'm giving you, but I obviously don't. I want you to answer them. But in cases so horrific, there's always something that normally leads up to it. Something has happened that leads up to it. And
Exactly. And that's why I start with Darlie's whole entire background. The thing that led up to her mental state, in my opinion, started when she was 8 years old. Kathy doesn't deny that Danny did this to her. She changes the story up. I know what she told me about Danny. She minimized it. But Darlie said he molested her. Kathy disagreed. That's where it started at. And then she had to live with that man for another 10 years almost. And he got away with touching her and molesting her as a child. He got away with it.
and and so this is why I'm asking you that question. Have you ever seen anything with Darlie that would have made you think she could have done something like this?
No, because it was not her. First off, Darren is really, really passive. He's not the kind of person that would.
But she asked about he asked about Darlie, and she switched no because, and then she goes on to Darren. We got to consider that sometimes people who are psychopathic don't show any signs of it until they explode. I'm sure Ted Bundy was a real nice guy, and there was no signs of him being a killer until he started killing.
Uh, get in a fight, or if confronted on the street by muggers, he'd just hand over his wallet. He wouldn't fight. He wouldn't argue. Just here you go, and then run. You know, uh, Darlie was not what I would call a fighter either.
I was fighting. I was fighting. We struggled. Darlie is not a fighter. She claims to have fought off that intruder, though.
But she would have gone, "What? You want my wallet? Well, how about I just give you my money? I've got pictures of my kids in here." you know?
I could see that. I could see that. I really could.
Oh, so try to make a deal with someone that's trying to steal from her? She'll try to compromise? She's trying to compromise with that person. When I look at her now, she's on the other side of the crimes. And she's still trying to compromise, right?
That's a Darlie. She wouldn't have, and uh, so as far as reactions go in their behavior, I didn't see anything unusual. They were young kids. I saw immature behavior. They fought like cats and dogs sometimes.
They fought like cats and dogs sometimes. Just like they were doing on the night of June 5th, 1996, before Darren went to bed. And a week or so prior to that, just like Boz just said, that when she came over there that day, they were fighting. They had been fighting for a week nonstop. Thank you, Cathy, for letting us know that their marriage wasn't as wonderful as everybody tries to make it seem. They fight like cats and dogs. Cats and dogs are totally opposite of each other, and they hate each other just for that. For being opposite. Cats and dogs are racist. Oh, you're a cat? I don't like you. You're a dog? I don't like you.
It wasn't physical, but they could word fight between themselves and then call each other names and get mad. And
See, where was Candy at when all this was happening? She tries to make it seem like she can evaluate their entire life, and she wasn't around. Again, I'll go back to she did not go to the hospital. She did not go to the funeral. She did not go to the viewing. She did not come visit her. She's never been to prison to visit her, and I asked her why. I said, well, how come you haven't been to prison to visit her? She's been here all these years. Well, I just didn't want to take away from anyone else being able to see her. Only so many people are allowed on that visiting list. She's had Richard Wright, Darren Groves, interviews with people, uh, Rich Prater, his wife, they all go to see her. But Cathy just didn't want to get in the way of their visits. I mean, she was a friend, but I hadn't seen her since 1995. This is how good friends we are.
you know,
I,
break
I
up and
think
get back
everybody does
together.
that. Yeah. Well,
Break up
I
and get
know,
back together.
and so many people have speculated over the years that if Darlie didn't do it, then Darren did it. And I know that you're personal friends with Mr. Routier, and some of your family members are as well. Um,
He keeps saying that they're personal friends. All right, when was the last? Have you ever been to Darren's ranch? When was the last time y'all hung out? They're not personal friends.
would you believe in any way that Darren would have been able to pull off such a heinous crime?
Not himself personally. He's too passive. He's much too passive. He is not the kind of person that would have sneakily been able to get away with it either, especially without.
He sneakily gets away with lots of shenanigans, like Rich says. He's into a lot of shady stuff, and he helps some really bad people. But he's very passive. He wouldn't know how to commit a crime.
Darlie recognizing him because, like I said, she saw a glimpse of the person from the rear and she didn't recognize it as her husband. It was a stranger. That's why she got up to investigate because it wasn't. If she thought it was Darren, she probably would have called out Darren.
Well,
You
not
know,
even that. I mean, Darlie and Darren weren't getting along real good for about a week leading up to the murders. And Darlie had been sleeping downstairs. So many people say, well, I've heard people say things like Darlie's covering for Darren or Darren's covering for.
Darlie is not covering for Darren. She's not covering for Darren. She doesn't want Darren to tell everything he knows, though. She's not covering for Darren.
Darlie. Well, if they were fighting that bad, all right, things were that bad in the house. Why didn't Darlie say it was Darren? It was Darren.
Things are bad enough for her to ask for a separation. And she couldn't say it was Darren, because Darren knows something that he's not telling. She could say it was Darren because then Darren would unleash on what he knew. Come on one day and she's threatening to kill herself. There's pills under the bed and she wrote in the doc. No, she wouldn't want to go against Darren.
Darren's the one that did it. If this was a revengeful act, that's so many people claim that it is. Why didn't they name one another as
Spousal revenge filicide. Why didn't they name one another? Because they're both complicit. I think Darren's complicit. I think he covered some things up. Why didn't they name one another? Because they'd both end up in prison.
being the perpetrator? And that didn't happen. And still today, 30 years later, that has never happened. Just
well, and
something.
I'd like to point something out to the people that have ever lived in a hot climate in a two-story house. Uh, the second story is always hotter than the first story, even if
Yeah.
you have separate units because heat.
Not necessarily. If you have the AC turned up upstairs, no, not necessarily hotter, but heat does rise. As far as I know, Kathy's never been to the house at 5801 Eagle Drive.
Rises, so the load is always heavier. So while the baby kept her awake, it was probably cooler downstairs.
Probably. It was probably cooler downstairs. Probably. If your thermostat is set to to air conditioning 65, 70 degrees air conditioner, it's going to go to the room that it's in is at that temperature before it cuts off.
And she probably liked sleeping downstairs.
She says probably. Right? Why would you like sleeping downstairs? Well, I love my wife 100%. We've been together for 18 years. If she gets up out of the bed to use the bathroom or something and comes back, I'll lay there and sleep. But if she gets up out of the bed in the middle of the night, and let's say she sits down and has something to eat or whatever, if I know that she's not there immediately, and I'll go look and see where she's at, I want my cuddle money. Can't think of nothing better. I sleep better with her right next to me.
And she had been pissed off at Darren, but it wasn't so much that it's like, hey, I'm just going to sleep down here. I'm cranky. I'm tired. I've had it with you and your stuff and enjoy.
How does she know this stuff? She's speculating. She slept downstairs because she was mad at Darren. She cut him off. I don't believe the whole story with the baby rocking in the crib. There's nowhere. Let me give you an example. There's no testimony or no word of mouth that Darlie had trouble sleeping upstairs because of the baby until the murders. Then all of a sudden, there was this big problem of Drake. We have two different stories of what he was doing in the crib. Some people say that he rocked back and forth in his crib and that the crib would make noise on the wood floor and that would wake up Darlie. Well, a simple solution to that is just buy a piece of carpet and put the best, the crib on the carpet. Then it won't make the noise on the wood floor. Problem solved. But then, if you listen to Darren tell the story of he would say that Drake made noise in his crib with his mouth, grunting and rooting. Nothing about the wood floor making a bunch of noise. There's two different stories of how Drake bothered her while she was asleep. Now, for me, if I had a child that was an infant and their sleep habits were so much that they would grunt and root all night long and just make a bunch of noise while they're trying to. I would try to find out what was causing the child to do that. You wouldn't just say, fuck this, I'm going downstairs to sleep. I don't even want to be around this shit. Fucking brat. Keep me awake.
Enjoyed it and
Well, I mean,
enjoyed, the cooler temperature, and said, "Hey, you know what? I got a good night's sleep. I think I'm going to," because she's still mad at Darren for whatever it was. The car getting chewed out over the car lot. The believe me, keeping up with three kids, especially the active ones, and
yeah.
trying to keep your house clean the way Darlie liked her house clean.
That's why Darlie paid to have her house cleaned up. Beja and Helena were not the first housekeepers she had. In fact, she had had housekeepers for 2 years. They keep saying that Darlie kept an immaculate house. Well, the way she kept it was with Darren's money. She didn't do it from pure hard work. She paid people because she's fucking lazy.
Is a difficult job.
Oh yeah, and that
It's so difficult that they had to hire other people to do it for Darlie.
house was spotless too. That house was gorgeous. Um, I've talked
I
to
mean,
Darla Lynn in length about it, and she did give me permission to share this because it was one of the first questions I asked her. So, what were you and
Well, Darlie said,
Darren fighting about that night? And she said, Rich, it was about all the play toys Darren had, and he never took care of them. And she was talking about the Mustang. She was talking about the fence gate in the backyard.
you mean
But
the Jag?
yeah, the
The
Jaguar.
Jag.
I was going to say, he didn't have a Mustang. And the Jag had an internal problem. He tried to get it fixed, but
The
The
Jaguar.
the
I'm sorry,
Jag, the boat, the
the
fence.
boat. And she said, he wanted all these play toys, but yet he would never take care of anything. And she said she couldn't stand it. And she did say that on that night, she did ask Darren for a separation. And she confirmed.
she told you that. But she did not tell the Rowlett Police Department that in writing in her first initial statement. She tells you they were fighting, but in her statements to police, she didn't say they were fighting.
That with me. But what you have to unless you know, and I don't know Mr. Routier, but I do know Darlie Lynn very well. And
I like how he says I do know Darlie Lynn very well. So when you and your family get together with Darlie and they go to order, have a restaurant, go to get something to eat. What's her favorite meal? What kind of car does she drive? What kind of movies does she like? You know what Darlie tells you from the other side of a prison visiting room. That's what you know. You don't know Darlie at all. You know what she shows you. You're there to see her. She realizes that.
That argument really wasn't as bad as a lot of people blow it up to be. It was more
Well, it must have been bad because she wanted separation from the love of her fucking life.
of a spit spatting kind of thing rather than, and
Whatever it was, she was mad at him. It was bad enough for her to sleep downstairs.
you know, it's just a typical married couple argument. And
Well, the thing with the typical married couple argument, like me and my wife have them. We have a little bit of arguments. Usually we argue for a little bit and then we walk away from each other. But the difference is we didn't have an argument. She never asked me for a separation. I never asked her for one. And our kids didn't come up dead an hour later. Didn't happen.
I said, were you guys fighting over money or anything? She said, no. And I said, did Darren ever get physical with you? She said, no. So,
In fact, she even said they cuddled on the couch and made up that night before he went
yeah,
up to bed.
right.
So that might
They didn't agree. They didn't. They never told that there was argument. She never said they made up and cuddled. He did not. He did not lay on the couch with her.
have been, hey, while I don't want a separation, you got to take care of this shit. I'm
She never said I don't want a separation. He wrote down that she said she did want a separation.
still going to sleep downstairs. It's cooler. The baby doesn't wake me when he rolls around in the crib. And a lot of people like, well, she could sleep through murders, but she couldn't sleep through that. Don't
Well,
realize that a crib squeaks, and that when you're a mom and your ears are tuned to listening for your baby, the sounds your baby make will wake you up.
Well, first of all, Cathy. First of all, Cathy Ramsey. Darren explained that it wasn't the crib that made the noise. It was the baby grunting and rooting in his crib. Now, let's say you have a crib that's a little bit squeaky. Yeah? All you got to do is tighten it up. Darren can build a ranch, but he can't fix a fucking crib.
So
yeah.
she was
That's what
still
mothers
in
do.
what I call baby mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was probably getting time to move Drake into his own room, but he was still a baby, and she didn't want to, lose that closeness with him either. He still slept in his parents' room. And
Yeah.
so, that just shows you that she had a deep, deep attachment to those kids.
She was so attached to Drake that when he had a problem at nighttime with making noise, that she just removed herself to a whole different part of the house. That's how attached she was.
If that baby is still in their bedroom at 9 months old.
He was 7 months old.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to falter for her parenting, and I don't want to be faulted for mine, but, just the way I was raised and told, when my kids were able to sleep through the night is when they went into their own room. Because they didn't need me there in the middle of the night to attend to them. So,
Right.
Well,
Darlie wasn't attending to him in the middle of the night. He's making noise, so she left.
with one kid, it was, I think the longest I had a kid in my room was like 2 months.
Yeah, I don't recall. I mean, my daughters are in their 30s. Yeah, I think it was just a brief period of time that they were in the bedroom with me and the ex-wife, and just a short period of time after that, they got moved into their own room. But other than that, now we're at 33 minutes. We want to try to do this in an hour, If you look at the bottom of the screen, it says warning, graphic and or disturbing images will be shown on this episode. And the reason why that's the case is because Annie Oakley here wanted to go through a few crime scene photographs and make some observations. And so we're going to go ahead and get to those photographs now. But before we do that, I want to share with everybody about the Darlie Routier case debate forum. All right, Annie and Jamie, which Jamie will be on a future episode on a one-on-one interview on the case.
Now you notice in this group, the Darlie Routier case debate forum, right? Join Annie and Jamie. This is neither one of their real names. Cathy Ramsey. Diane Lohman Patterson. Why do they hide behind fake names when they're trying to convince the public of Darlie's innocence? Even when I supported Darlie, hey, my name's BryanSt.John, I live in Dayton, Ohio. Here's my phone number. Here's my email. Get a hold of me. I want to know more. Why they use fake names, beyond me.
Coming up, they have a group that they pretty much run together on Facebook. There are rules to the forum, and people are to be.
The rules are you can't insult anyone over there, but they can insult you.
Respected there. And let me just say this, Annie is the best debater and most respectful debater on this case.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I could debate with her. She won't, but I can debate with her. I have put her in her place a couple times over the years.
Whether you're for or against Darlie. And that's a great room. I don't do a lot of participation in it, but I do read it. I get in arguments with people too easy, and I'll get nasty. So that's why I don't do it, because I don't want to treat people that way. Even though a lot of them like to treat me that way.
You don't want to save Darlie's life by telling the truth? Who cares what they feel?
I don't like treating people that way. So anyway, you can also join Annie, who's live with us today, and Jamie on that debate forum and on Facebook. So again, this is the one-on-one with Annie, and this is States Exhibit 43. And I'm going to go ahead and get my pointer working in case there's anything you want me to point out. But go ahead, Annie, whatever you want to talk about on States Exhibit 43.
That's how they complain about the quality of the photos, the way that the pictures were taken, the order that they were taken in, the cameras they were used with, the film they were used with. But when it's suitable for them, they use those same photos to make their points.
Okay, let's look at the vacuum cleaner laying in the middle of the floor with the cord all scattered out, and look at its position in relationship to the trash can. Okay, now let's go to the picture above it and enlarge it if you can, Rick.
Yeah, let me see if I can here. Yeah, let me see if I can get Bonnie in here real quick to make sure I can get it enlarged to your liking. Hold on one second.
I click on it, and I don't know if you can do the finger move or what.
Yeah, Bonnie, Annie would like to know if you could enlarge this picture a little bit on here, the States Exhibit number 43. I'm not exactly sure how to do it. Oh, you can't do it this way? Oh, that kind of stinks. Or wait, Bonnie's going to look at it real quick. Oh, you can do it. That's wonderful.
Only a little bit.
All right. Well, every bit will count.
The next two pictures are broken up.
Well, that's okay. See, I thought maybe I could go there and do it, but.
Yeah.
All right, bear with us here, folks. We'll get this straightened out. Looks like it's about as big as it's going to get.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think it's about as. Whoa. What is this? Okay, Annie, I think that's about as big as we can get this picture. However, I think this these two same photographs are in the line of succession here, and they're much larger formats. So it should work out well. If you want me to, I can go ahead and advance to those photos now, or you
Yes,
can say what you want to say here.
well,
All
let's
right,
go ahead and advance.
there's one. That would have been the top picture.
Now notice that footprint is leading away from a sink. We don't see Annie here going to the sink.
Okay, so they're showing us where the vacuum cleaner was laying and that it was
Yeah,
on top of this footprint that looks like it's skidded.
yeah.
Well, there's the edge of the counter. The dog and cat food are now not there.
In order for that vacuum cleaner to have not goofed up those prints and messed up the droplets and things like that, it the blood would need to be dry.
Hmm.
So I think these because if it hadn't dried, it would still be liquidy. Now we see what it looks like when the vacuum cleaner was run through wet blood, and that's some heavier, darker deposit.
Yeah.
If you're able to blow up the picture any bigger, then you can actually look at the tails that are on these blood drops in front of our vacuum cleaner roll mark.
Those are straight down drops. There's no tail on it. There's a tail on this one. But these ones that she's talking about, those are straight down drops, not moving drops.
And you'll see that they are all a very heavy deposit. It also, I find it funny that this thing that looks like a footprint going towards the kitchen sink is what she chose if she's trying to cover up evidence. Trying to cover up evidence of what? That she went
It's not going towards the kitchen sink. If that's what she's talking about, that's good. That's going away from it.
to the sink and wet towels, went to the drawer and got towels. What
Yeah.
evidence does she need to clean up? Uh,
And I mean,
so
there's evidence, not only blood evidence and footprint evidence that she did that, but also there's blood on the drawer that she opened to get the towels out of.
I think that the reason that she chose to wipe off the sink and the counters, which she did, she wiped off the counters around it, is because when she cut her neck, it splattered. And she would have to explain how that splatter got near the sink. Why is she splattering by the sink? She didn't say, well, I chased the intruder and he turned around and stabbed me while I was by the sink. She had to explain why it was splattered. It was off in the backwash too. I mean, they were splattered, luminol. So she cut her neck there, and it splattered. That's why she needed to clean it up.
correct. And you've got to think about these wounds that she's got. She's got one
She's telling you you've got to do this.
to the right arm that's very deep. That is off.
It's not very deep. It's not, in the arm. You just touch your skin right there by the top of your wrist. It's not very deep at all. It's just a shallow point of your body.
Also going to affect your muscle control in your hand. You're
That's
not
right.
going to be as very, and as soon as that knife is withdrawn, that wound is going to start bleeding. And that's why I surmise that these droplets that we see, those are tracks of the right side of her body, the position of her arm. Now you've got to remember our arms do move kind of front and backwards as we walk. So I expect to see some blood going in both directions just from the normal
Yeah.
pace of walking.
If you look here, you can see tails on these blood drops here, which
I don't see any tails on these. I just don't. That doesn't show direction. It shows so. If she was moving, you'd have a tail on it. This shows someone standing. Another one right there.
Should be the indication of going this way. You can see the tails on it. Now, if you look, let's see here. Where did I just see that?
See how Rich is moving this pointer around? Here's an example of a tail. He's moving the pointer around and it's leaving a little tail. But if he stops the pointer, it leaves a circle. But it's leaving a little tail. This is a circle. There's no movement there. Rich's pointer's moving around, it's leaving a tail.
Got a tail here.
There's no
So
tail.
that'd be an
And they're
indication of
going
in the direction of walking away from the sink. Here.
So you have blood drops leading to the sink and away from the sink.
That is correct.
We don't know if they're leading to the sink or away from the sink. Come on, I don't see tails.
Yeah, you
Order
got
for her.
another one here.
In order for her to leave footprints in blood, that can only occur by two methods. Either you step into blood, which inks your foot, and you have to ink your entire foot because her entire foot is shown.
Yeah.
And we don't find any blood deposits that are large enough to ink your entire foot. So, and this is
maybe one deposit wouldn't be large enough to ink your foot, but if let's say she stepped on this, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it would spread and cover your foot.
a much heavier because of the skidding, which indicates a flowing of the blood. The blood is still flowing. It has had to saturate her shirt, run down her shirt, run down her legs, and now be dripping down her feet into the arch of her feet where it rolls down and soaks the bottom of her foot. She is bleeding very heavily when she takes this step and skids, especially around the toes. Path of least resistance. Your toes at the top of your foot are the lowest point. So it's running down the front and the inside of her legs. And this is occurring after the neck has been cut. This is blood from her neck and from her shirt that has saturated her feet. That would take time. And according to Greg Davis, she stood at the sink and injured herself, and that when she left the kitchen, she never.
It would take time, huh? So you can go back to where the medical examiner you guys claim said that he can only last 9 minutes. If it would take time, that means Darlie's. I don't understand the point on that taking time. Is it just goes against
Returned, and she left behind these bloody footprints.
Bloody footprint.
Well, if she left the kitchen and left behind these bloody footprints and never returned, her hands would have had to have been full. She would have needed towels. She would have needed the phone. She would have needed to break a glass. And let's see, and place the knife on the counter and to wet some of those towels. And all those things she would have had to have carried along with the vacuum cleaner. Is this adding up to you? I mean, does this seem realistic?
Yeah.
She could do that all at different times. She didn't have to have the phone in her hand and a towel to her neck when she smacked that glass out of the thing. Come on. You don't make any sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, so but I'm saying, isn't that a far stretch?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
if she was trying to do all that at once, if she had the phone in her hand, a towel to her neck, she's trying to wet towels, if she was trying to do that all at once, yeah, that'd be a far stretch. But we're not claiming that.
don't we need to make her fly or something?
Something.
In that kind of story? I mean, it's just not feasible. Then we see the rolled up rug here that's in front of this vacuum.
Yeah, the
but
famous
it's covering
rug.
up. Right, but it's covering up a footprint. So that rug has been moved.
Let's see the picture where it's covering up a footprint. And yes, you have to move things to investigate.
Since the
And
footprint was deposited.
you can clearly see this footprint here is walking toward the sink.
No, not. It's the back of her foot. There's the heel, there's the arch, and here would be the toe.
They're walking
No,
toward,
it's
yeah.
going away.
Are
It's
you sure
going
about
away
that?
from the sink. Yeah, you'll
Yeah, that's going away from the sink. Even Cathy straightened him up. He tried to tell you that it was going too. No, that's the heel of the foot right there. There's the arch of the foot.
see it. It's the really only good sharp. Well, it's not a good and sharp one, but that's her arch
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
roundness
You
of
get
her
a
heel
real
in
high
the
arch.
back. She's going towards the den, and the footprint in front of it, she's going away. So there's one going.
You have to also remember that the first responders testified that Darlie stood at this is the edge of that counter, the sink counter. That Darlie stood in this area right here almost the whole time that they were in the house.
To and going from, and
And
the blood that we see along here next to the vacuum cleaner, those are the drops from when she was headed back towards the sink, and she wasn't bleeding quite as heavily. And I think that was her first trip, and she very
Maybe her bleeding slowed down at some point.
possibly might have even rinsed her arm off in the sink because she was bleeding heavily. I would have, to look at my
yeah,
own wound,
sure.
see how bad it was.
But Darlie didn't mention rinsing her arm off and looking at it.
At least rinse it
Now,
out. And
I
I
really
think
want
that is your diluted blood right there. There's your diluted blood. Look at the color of it.
Diluted blood. Come on, man.
I really want to point something out about this rug. When on one of my visits
Darlie told me.
to Darlie, she told me a story about it, and I'm going to try to be brief with it. And she was telling me that when she got a glimpse of the intruder walking away from her, and because she had woke up because Damon was touching her shoulder, crying, "Mommy." Okay. So as soon as she got up, she heard glass jingling, not breaking. She heard it jingling, like glasses kind of like chiming together. And, and then she obviously walked over to her. She never told me she heard a glass break, said she heard him like jingling. Now, if you look at this rug, she told me she hated this damn rug. And that was the exact word she used. She said, "I don't know why I kept that damn thing because everybody tripped on it." And she said every time somebody would walk over this rug, it would roll up on a corner or the side because everybody tripped on it. And she goes, "I don't even know why I kept it." But she told me, you can see the wine
She told me. She told me.
rack here. She told me.
She told me. I'm gonna do a rap song. She told me.
That part, the one corner of the rug was curled up as if somebody tripped on it. And Darlie believes, and I think this is quite possible, that the intruder tripped on this rug and fell into the wine rack. And it's a very good possibility that's how the glass got broke in the wine rack, not on the
Yeah. He would have knocked more down than just one if he slipped on that.
floor. He ran into it. He tripped and fell into the wine rack.
Okay, so when he tripped over this bunched up rug as he was going this way and fell into the wine rack, then how does that rug covering up the toe part of this footprint?
And this actually confirms what Darlie said about the rug. You can clearly see it's rolled up here. And she told me it was rolled up. She noticed that. It was one of the first things she noticed on her way coming back out of the utility room after she turned on the light. She noticed that the rug was rolled up.
Coming back to the utility room.
So anyway, it's a little interesting story I wanted to share with people. Not a lot of people know about that. So, but anyway, Andy, did you have any more to cover on States Exhibit 43C?
No, let's go to the next photo.
All right.
Okay, we see the skidded the skidded print.
Now, once they removed the vacuum cleaner, they lifted it straight up. They didn't roll it. They told how they removed the vacuum cleaner is that they got under it and they lifted it straight up and carried it, right? This is where the vacuum cleaner was laying. That footprint is under it.
On the left foot. Her next, it's over here on the right side of the screen, her left foot. Right there. That's her skidded one. Down here in the corner on the other side, underneath there, that's her right. And if that's her only trip, why is she jumping across the kitchen from one side to the other? And how does she land this print like Mary Lou Retton?
I have no idea what she means by that.
Because it's a very clear print. If you go to close up of those prints, you'll see that it's a very good print of her right foot. No skid marks, anything like that. So, and her foot is more heavily deposited on the left than it is on the right. And if you look at her shirt, the lowest point of her wound at her neck is on the left side, and she also has a stab wound there on her left. So the substantial portion of blood is going to be on the left side of the body. Now, my expertise, I'm not a blood analyst. I don't have a degree in it, but I do have years of hunting and tracking. And you have to be able to follow a blood trail. You have to be able to tell which direction the person is going and read the droplets. And that is the father of the science of blood analysis, is animal tracking.
Well, I don't see. They keep trying to say that there were tails on these, and there just isn't. I don't see tails.
So I learned the basics from that, and blood analysis is built on that. So that is I have the root science. I have the basic skills.
Yeah, you can see on these two particular blood droplets here, you can see the tails.
Yeah, he's talking about that right there. I don't know if that's a tail or not. It doesn't look like it because of the shape of the blood drop is so rounded.
On the blood droplets, which is an indication of movement, of walking.
Right, but you'll also see blood droplets with different tails going in a different direction.
Yeah, that is correct.
And this, her Mary Lou Retton one is below, and there's a real good 44D is a good blow up of it. But if you want to move on, because this is that is 43F.
Yeah.
Which is over bright, because see the reflection in the that's too much exposure on that.
I want to point something out here. Now, this is a double homicide and an attempted homicide crime scene, right? Now, whoever took this picture, you can see their shoes. Why aren't their shoes in baggies? You don't walk around the crime scene without your feet being covered with something, because you'll contaminate it. What's this?
Well, and it's the blue socky.
Well, so in baggies, they would contaminate it too if you stepped on anything.
That they wear.
Yeah, that's
over
right.
their feet.
Yeah, well, how come they're not wearing them here? Look at this, folks. Talk about crime scene contamination.
Well, how are they contaminated? Show me where these feet contaminate anything.
That's
And
real.
remember those things that you put on your shoes. If you step on a blood spot with your shoe on, you might spread it around. If you step on a blood spot with your shoe on and one of those things around it, you still might spread it around.
Really bad. That's terrible. Uh, Homicide investigative work. Absolutely terrible.
Absolutely terrible. But you sure are using the photos that they took to try and make your points, aren't you?
Okay, this is State's Exhibit 44A.
Okay, right at the bottom of her arch where it joins at the heel, do you see that blood drop?
Oh, sure. Are you talking about?
Okay, inside the footprint,
Yeah, right here.
right there. Blood is going to go the path of least resistance. It's going to go down into her arch, just like we see in the right foot. And it's not going to drop off the side of the ankle because or the side of the top of the arch. It's going to keep flowing. That drop was deposited before the footprint.
Yeah.
Or after, but it was not deposited at the same time. It's also, how does she, if that's the right side of her body, depositing those blood drops, she couldn't have held her arm across her body and made it drop to the left side of her body. Those are drops from her right arm. She was bleeding when she was headed to the sink. These blood drops around the footprint prove it because they're to the left of the footprint and it's her right arm that's injured.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'd have to study more on that.
Animals often go in circles or double victims too, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
hate to tell people, but if you're a crime victim or family of a crime victim, don't look to the court system to give you justice because you won't get it there. God's the only one in charge of justice.